Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. Joining us this week on the show is an acclaimed author and editor. You will know her as the editor-in-chief at Tenebrous Press, one of our favorite indie horror presses, as well as the author of books like Whisperwood. Her latest novel is called The Night Ship, and it is available now wherever you get your horror books. Alex Woodroe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this.
I'm so happy to have you. I met you. You're one of many cool horror people I met last year at Ghoulish Book
Mhm.
Fest here in Texas, and it was
Yeah.
great to finally meet you after knowing you from the internet for a while. And this has kind of been a long time coming. When I saw you had a new book coming out, I was like, oh, good. We got to get Alex on the podcast. And this book, The Night Ship, has an amazing conceptual hook launching this story. So for anyone who doesn't know about it yet, could you give our listeners just a quick teaser of what The Night Ship is?
Yeah, absolutely. I really love the concept of this book because I actually sold it on the concept before it was written. I told the concept to the press and they said yes instantly. And I was like, I know this is a winner. Um, so the night ship is kind of set in the very last chunk of communist Romania of dictatorship. And it's the story about these three people in a logging truck across the country. The two of them are a couple, and they pick up a third, which is a hitchhiker. And at some point, a radio transmission comes through that tells them that something serious is happening, and they have to to go to a radio tower urgently. And as they make their way there, basically the entire world disappears. Everything is covered in blackness. Everything is gone. And there are these mysterious transmissions coming through the radio of other people in little pockets that have survived. But for the most part, the world as they know it is completely gone. And so the entirety of the book, they're traversing this vastness of absolutely nothing, like the vastness of space, basically, in their logging truck, trying to figure out what happened and whether there's anything left to even go to anymore. At the same time as looking for other survivors and navigating interpersonal dynamics and trying to figure out if all of the transmissions that they're receiving are even coming from humans at all. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's the night ship.
it's incredible. I got to do something that I don't get to do that often, which was I started reading this without knowing anything about the plot. I just knew it was your new book, and I was like, well, of course I want to read Alex's new book. So I just opened it. I didn't read anything, just opened it and went, oh my gosh, this is so imaginative and cool. I think I have an inkling of the answer to this question, but I want to ask you, what was the seed of this story? How did the story start for you in your imagination?
Oh gosh, I was obsessed with so many aspects of this story, and I feel like the best stuff that I happen to write is whenever I get really obsessed with something. And like one of the obvious ones is just driving around here through the countryside when it's dark and you see these radio stations, the lights in the dark across the hills because it's a hillsy area. So you get to see a very long distance away. And oftentimes seeing the tractors during the summer, they harvest sunflowers at night. And you will just see across this vastness of nothing the headlights of this truck in the distance. Um, and then, of course, it's in part my obsession with limited settings, with small spaces in which you get to stick characters, and with situations where they maybe don't even know exactly what's going on out there because you're telling the story in here. So all of my friends know I'm majorly obsessed with Pontypool. That is one of my core stories, and that's part of what went into this, obviously. Or like the movie The Vast of Night, obviously a lot of games because I do play a lot of like survival horror stuff. And anybody who's a gamer is going to probably read this book and go, "Hey, there's a lot of inventory management in here." Yes, that's yes, there is. Absolutely. That's my bad. It just it happens, you cannot stop your influences from influencing you. So I think that's pretty much the trifecta.
It's set in Romania in 1987. So there's also something that I'm fascinated by as, someone who grew up in America, which is it's a wonderful metaphor. And it's also interesting that these characters are not sure how to deal with each other because with communism on its way out, but still trying to keep a grip, there are some people who are loyal to the communists, and there are some people
Yeah,
who want a revolution and to overthrow that
yeah.
regime. And so you have this inherent tension, and it really feels like they are trying to navigate a world that is being remade around them, both literally and metaphorically. And I know you're from Transylvania, and you gave me a lovely postcard from Transylvania when I met you, which I still have here in the office. What did your own background and childhood have to do with this? Is that something that you were comfortable excavating? Is it something that was difficult for you?
Oh yeah, I definitely dug into that a lot, and it's not uncomfortable or difficult because I'm pretty much exactly young enough that I was born in like the third month after the revolution,
Mm,
basically. So my sister, who's 8 years older, got to spend her childhood under dictatorship. I got to be born basically the minute after it ended, which isn't to say that I don't experience, that I didn't and don't continue to experience a lot of the after effects, because that's not something that actually ends in a day or a month or a year. It is still right here, right now. Like it is still in the architecture, it is still in the traditions, it is still in the way that people think, it is still in everything. And only people who have not been to former, the Soviet Dominion countries can imagine that once it was over, it was actually over. Like if you've been here, it's clearly not. And so it impacted a lot of my upbringing. It impacted a lot of my schooling. The reason why I'm speaking to you in English and the reason why I write in English is because of dictatorship, because they were not allowed to learn that language. They were forced to learn Russian because all of the, US media was banned and people were risking their lives to smuggle a Rolling Stones album across the border. And because of that, the moment that dictatorship ended, basically immediately before I was born, everybody started to idolize the English language, American culture, American movies. So I grew up with American media and books in English and movies in English and Disney videotapes. Nothing was overdubbed, nothing had subtitles. So, like, even just that made me the person I am today. And aside from that, obviously, I grew up with my grandparents and parents' stories of what their lives were like during those times. Um, I feel like they're very selective, clearly, because it was a very traumatizing time. So I got to hear mostly the fun stories because people in Romania tend to have an attitude of making light and making humor out of everything. We have some excellent comedies on the topic for about, dictatorship times. Obviously, that doesn't mean that it was a lighthearted time. It's just the
hmm
way the people are built. And so I got to hear all of these stories of like my grandfather was a logging truck driver. My grandmother was a nurse and she was frequently taking time off to go with him on their trips and spend time together. And so they would be driving this truck across the mountainsides. And they never outright told me anything about the smuggling part, but I'm pretty sure I have reason to believe that that was actually happening as well. And like they've told me so many stories of what it was like to live then, both funny and horrific. And of course, a lot of that ended up going into the book, even though the book itself doesn't necessarily take place in any like historically accurate dictatorship times, because basically by the second chapter, the world is over. But all of those influences still linger and still affect those people, much in the same way as they affect me, even though I was born right after the revolution.
Yeah, it's a wonderful way to explore it. And you mentioned something a minute ago that I want to double back on because I'm also obsessed with it, which is single location horror.
Mhm.
Limited setting. Pontypool is also one of my favorite movies. Um, and anyone out there listening who hasn't seen Pontypool, go see it.
Oh my goodness, yes.
It's brilliant. Um, so with Whisperwood, you wrote a book about a woman who seeks out this community that then she can't
Uh-huh.
leave. And
Mm-hmm.
here you have these people stuck in a logging truck. Um, and I love when authors are able to do that and able to hem their characters in that way. Is it something that you feel like comes naturally to you, or do you have to just make it happen? Are there days when you're just like, God, I wish I could get them out of this truck. The story would be so much easier.
I love that I'm getting called out on doing that. And you're gonna love this, but I actually have another book, which is going to be my third, which is coming out October this year. It's a novella, so it's coming through a different publisher. It's coming through Crash. And you're not gonna believe this. But the plot of that book is kind of around this researcher that's sent into this old abandoned Romanian manor to research why the end of the world is happening and why the entire planet is going crazy. And basically, the book opens as she walks into this manor, and the doors lock behind her, and she can no longer leave. So, yeah, that's definitely a familiar theme. I did not necessarily set out to make this a theme in my writing. I certainly wasn't thinking about it deliberately during writing Whisperwood. I was just thinking, I want to write something because it was the first book I'd ever written in my life. I want to write something that is comfortable, that is going to come at least a little bit naturally, because I know there's going to be so many other difficulties in writing a novel. I want to make it easy for myself where I can. So I was like, what comes naturally to me? What makes my imagination happy? Where do I go when I want to, unwind? Remote places. Like I literally moved to a place that is basically Whisperwood. It is so remote. And so at that point, I was just thinking about my own comfort and ease, and that's what ended up happening. Then with the night shift, the concept felt so compelling. Like, what do these people do if there's nothing else? And if your sole focus has to be communicating through radio messages with others, all of that unknown and having to embrace and accept that unknown. Like you don't have a choice, you don't get explanations in this book or in life in general. You don't get a lot of explanations. And it just felt like such an compelling concept. By the time I finished the third book, I kind of realized I had a thing. Yes, at that point I went, hang on a minute. Um, and I do believe that they are very different books from each other, but there's definitely the theme going through them of shutting things down into one small setting and going, okay, and now what?
I listen as someone who loves Die Hard and all of the uh subsequent knockoffs of Die Hard, where you just have it's an action movie on a bus, it's an action movie on a
Yeah,
boat, it's all
yeah.
I'm all for it. Write as many single location horror stories as you want, and I will show up and read them. Um,
There's so many variations you can do on any theme. It's so much fun. You
yeah,
don't
yeah,
need to
it's
explore anything else.
I mean, I've talked to several other, like most notably, I talked to Daniel Kraus about this a lot because
Mm-hmm.
he's done it, and he's also obsessed with this idea of boxing people in, and I
Mm-hmm.
mean, his favorite movie is Night of the Living Dead, which is
Mm-hmm.
also in that vein. So yeah, I love it, and I think it's a great incubator for horror stories. But now we're going to talk about a story that is not a single location story, and also not
Mm-hmm.
uh, a horror story, but you were talking about your
Well, that's debatable. That
that's
is
debatable,
debatable.
which we will get into in a minute. But I mean, you were talking about being raised on American media, and we're going to talk about
Mm-hmm.
one of the if you're a fantasy fan, a horror fan, a fan of weird stuff, you probably know this movie if you grew up in the '80s. It's called Return to Oz. Directed by Walter Murch, directed and co-written by Walter Murch, the only
Mm-hmm.
movie he ever directed, starring Fairuza Balk as Dorothy Gale. Um, the infamous Disney production that serves as an unofficial sequel to The Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Alex, what do you remember about your first time experiencing this movie?
Oh gosh, I remember a lot of it very well. Can you imagine that I hadn't actually rewatched it since that first time? And yet when you asked me what I would want, that is what came to mind, even though at this point I hadn't seen it. I have now because I watched it before doing this, but at that point I hadn't seen it since I was maybe, I want to say 12 or 13-ish, which I feel like is the perfect age to see that movie for the first time. Um, I thought maybe a little young, but no, it's perfect. And I could vividly remember so many of the scenes, so much of the imagery, and specifically the most horror and weird aspects of it. Like I had the picture of the wheelies in my mind perfectly formed, looking exactly the way that they did. And yeah, there were a lot of the visual elements, especially that really stuck with me and popped up into my brain. And like rewatching it definitely made me discover more things that I'd forgotten. But I think it's just the general ambiance of that film, the visuals, the characters that stick with you for a very long time.
The thing that I remember about Return to Oz, and I'm like you, I rewatched it last night. I had not seen it since I was a child. I don't
Mhm.
remember the exact age when I last saw it, but I know I was a child. I had not watched it as an adult until last night. And longtime listeners will know I was not allowed to watch horror stories as a kid. That was
Mhm.
a thing where my father was very anti, like, don't watch things that are going to scare you. That's just, don't do that. Um, but my grandmother was very much the kind of person who, if she saw anything on television or on the shelf at Walmart or something that was kid friendly, she would
Mhm.
record it on her VCR or buy it and just have it in the house as like the grandkids are coming over.
Yeah.
Here's something for them to watch. And she had Return to Oz. And she knew I was probably 7 or 8, I think, when I first saw it, because she knew I liked The Wizard of Oz. And she said,
Mm.
this is The Wizard of Oz Part 2. This is the next thing.
Ouch.
Well, the thing that sticks out is all of the fantasy elements of it.
Mhm.
I don't remember ever being scared by. I just remember being fascinated by all of the Oz stuff because it was not the Oz I knew from the
Mm-mm.
original, the Judy Garland
Yep.
film. And I was just fascinated by the way they had transformed it. The thing that scared me was all of the stuff in Kansas in the sort of prologue to her
Oh
returning to
yeah.
Oz.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
for those who don't know, we're going to spoil this movie that came out,
Hmm.
40 years ago. So, chill. Go watch it. It's on Disney Plus. Go watch it if you haven't watched it. Um, it's about this girl. Dorothy is back from Oz. She's in Kansas. She believes that everything that happened to her in Oz really happened.
Hmm.
Everyone around her thinks that she has suffered some sort of PTSD incident
Yeah,
where
yeah,
she's having these delusions and
absolutely.
she has bouts of insomnia because of it and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And
It's fully played off as PTSD from the tornado incident itself, from the
yeah,
house crashing down, 100%. Yeah.
yeah. So she basically, at her aunt and uncle are at their wits' end and they decide what she needs is this newfangled thing called electroconvulsive therapy.
Yeah.
So they take her to this doctor and he's going to give her electroshock therapy and then she escapes during a power outage and all of that. But
At this point,
the,
I should probably remind people that this is allegedly a children's movie.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Just hearing it said out loud like that, it is not a children's movie.
this was the stuff that frightened me because I didn't
Mhm.
understand at the time that it was this whole thing. It's set at the turn of at the beginning of the end of the 19th, the beginning of the 20th century, right there at the turn. And I didn't understand any of the stuff about electroshock therapy, what it was
Mhm.
used for, the history of it being abused by uh,
Yeah.
supposed health professionals and all of that. I just knew that this little girl who, I knew who Dorothy was. So I was like, why doesn't
Mhm.
anyone believe her? Why doesn't
Mhm.
anyone understand what this girl has been through and what she needs and what she wants?
Yeah.
Because I think as a kid, that was my biggest fear was that I wouldn't be understood, that
Mhm.
I would get shoved into some kind of situation that I didn't want to be in simply because no one was listening to me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that freaked me out as a kid.
It's totally terrifying because at its most literal, we were presented with the initial Oz movie, right, where she goes to Oz and suddenly the world is in color, and Oz is color and life and vibrancy and fun and a beautiful place. And so what the beginning of this movie is basically saying is we are going to electrocute the color out of this little girl. We are going to electrocute her brain until all memory of color and vibrancy and happiness goes away. And she comes back to the real world, which implicitly does not have that. And the visuals in general at the start aid with that because they're on this plot of land that's basically just mud. It's just mud and disaster. And like there's grass somewhere on some distant hills and it's green and it's beautiful, but their little plot of land is just mud. And when she first speaks, she walks out of the house and calls out for Toto. And there's this echo of like emptiness in her voice. The sound design in that moment is brilliant because she calls out for Toto and there's just this echo of nothingness that
Yeah.
is so terrifying and so lonesome in that place.
Well, and it's also the opening of the film really brings down the realism on what Kansas is now because like you said, I mean, the the film explains that the tornado destroyed their house,
Mm-hmm.
so they had to build a new house. They have
Which they
not
can't really afford. There's a second mortgage, and even
yeah,
so, they're struggling to rebuild it. Yeah.
they can't afford the new house. It's half finished. Uncle Henry apparently broke his leg and has now, even though his leg is supposed to be healed, has sort of just become this layabout who is disillusioned with the he's broken basically.
Well,
The
arguably, yeah, Uncle Henry's also suffering from some depression as an aftermath of the same sort of catastrophic effect event that's gave Dorothy PTSD. Yeah.
yeah. And of course Annie M is trying to hold the family together and get
Mhm.
work done and it's just it's all very
Real.
bleak. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very real and very bleak and I love that our transition back into Oz is not only taking place as Dorothy is fleeing this clinic where she's supposed to get
Mhm.
this electroshock therapy, but it happens during a storm. There's another
Yeah.
storm, and it's a rainstorm this time, not a tornado, but the storm is once again our gateway into Oz.
Mhm.
Um,
It is. It's a really bad thunderstorm, and it does give all of those like horror movie signals in that moment. Actually, even before that, I love one of my favorite cues at the start of this film that immediately tells you that this is not going to be Oz Part 2, that this is going to be a much more serious film, is the fact that she sends Toto home when they're on the way to the electroshock therapy. She sends Toto home and he's not coming on this adventure. That is their way of telling us this is not going to be an adventure where a little dog belongs. This is going to be way darker. Toto is not coming this time. I love that. And then, yeah, the whole scene with the storm, it's so dark and there's lightning and thunder and she's in this room and she doesn't know what's about to happen. If anything, that kid is way too calm about the whole experience.
yeah.
Like then and throughout the entire film, which I feel like only serves to make you as the viewer more anxious because she's not as terrified as she should be. And that makes you kind of terrified for her, I think. I thought that was very clever.
So she gets to Oz, and this is where it gets especially like we start off with strangeness, which I love because you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Toto is not coming, but
Mm-hmm.
she realizes when she gets to Oz that her favorite chicken from the farm,
Yeah.
Bellina, is there. And not only is Bellina there, Bellina can now talk.
Yep.
She just sounds like an old Southern lady who's full of wisecracks. So right away, like we have a wisecracking chicken
Mm-hmm.
on the journey. So it's very much like, yeah, this is not the
Mm-hmm.
same story. You are getting something new.
Yeah. And the way
And
that they get there is very Alice in Wonderland
it
coded. Like
is,
that
it
scene
is.
when they're floating on the water. There's a nearly identical scene in Alice where she's when she's washed away by her own tears. I'm probably like vaguely misremembering that, although it was one of my favorite books, so I'm sure I'm close. Where she was big and she was crying and she drank the potion to turn her small and then washed away on her own tears, and
Hmm.
that's sort of her entryway into one of the Alice books, and including the talking animals part, because I think that's where she meets the first bunch of them. That entire scene is almost identical to the way that Dorothy arrives in Oz this time, and I found that really lovely. Like that's a very clear, this is another place. And Alice is another one where it's clearly a horror story, vaguely coached as a children's story, but like we all know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and she even when she gets to Oz, I love the visual because she finds a piece of debris in this river where she's floating back
Mhm.
in Kansas, and she floats on the debris, and then you just see this shot of her floating on what looks like a vast and endless sea,
Mhm.
with the sun in the background, and then she washes up on what looks like a beach, but then you quickly realize is a puddle in the middle of
Yeah,
the deadly desert,
desert.
which is
Yeah.
is so named because if you touch the sand of the deadly desert, you die.
Yeah.
So they hop across some rocks and get back to the green part of Oz.
I
And
love the way she just rolls with that too. She's like, "Oh yeah,
yeah,
if you touch the sand, you die," and then she's just like, "Hop, hop, hop across these rocks." Like, girl, are you not afraid for your life at all? Jeez.
this is something that I think that this movie does better than any of the other Oz film adaptations, whichever
Mhm.
ones you like. I think it has when if you go back and read Frank Baum's books, there's a
Mhm.
lot of because they were written for young children. There's a lot of magical thinking. There's a lot of just
Mhm.
like, oh well,
Mhm.
of course this tree grows lunch pails. Why wouldn't it? Now you have lunch because the
Yep.
tree grows lunch pails, and he just comes up. You can tell he was just sort of making it up as he went along because he will
Oh
just
yeah.
suddenly trot out like there's no like like series Bible for the Oz books that he was writing. He
No,
wasn't.
no.
He
So
was
much
just like,
improvisation.
wait, I need a magic thing that will undo this
Mhm.
awful thing. Let's see if
Mhm.
it turns out the wizard has a magic hat that he won in a war long ago, and that he
Mhm.
uses that to solve this problem. So the film does that so well, and it starts with that. It starts with Dorothy going,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's the Deadly Desert." But it's okay because I know that if I just hop along these stones, we'll be cool.
It'll be fine.
And then there's the lunch pail tree, and she's like, "Well, now I know where I am because there's a lunch pail
Mhm.
tree." And of course, then she makes the discovery that Oz is in ruins, and she realizes this
Mhm.
because she finds the house that she crash landed in years ago, and it's next to the Yellow Brick Road, which is in ruins. And
Yep.
she runs to the Emerald City and finds the Emerald City in ruins. The Scarecrow is gone. The Lion and the Tin Woodsman are statues. And there are these awful creatures called Wheelers that roll around and make trouble. And she finds out
Mhm.
that Oz has been taken over by the Gnome King.
And that's
And
one of my favorite parts of this is seeing Oz destroyed, seeing the yellow brick road dug up.
yeah,
That immediately, obviously not when I was a kid and I first saw it, but now with the baggage I have and the experience I have and the books I've read and the work I do, I saw that and I went, oh, this is post-apocalyptic.
yeah,
This is post-apocalyptic. There was an apocalypse in Oz. This is a piece of post-apocalyptic fiction. Like, do people notice? Did they realize that when they made it? Did they realize that when they were seeing it? This is, I don't know, maybe one of the very early post-apocalyptic movies we ever had. But that's what
it's
it is.
it's Mad Max Fury Road, but in
Yeah.
Oz, like it's very much just.
Yeah.
And what I love about it too is how quickly the film settles into like Dorothy is frightened. This is all different and not the way she
Mhm.
remembers it. Her friends are in trouble. She immediately shifts into problem solving mode.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in line with like
Yeah.
this is my true home and I need
Yeah.
to immediately save it. And that is how we begin to meet all of the new creatures that populate Oz, from TikTok, the wind up soldier, to Jack Pumpkinhead, who is exactly what he sounds like, to I think the most identifiable horror aspect of the film, which is Mombi.
And the Wheelers and the
The Wheelers,
Wheelies.
the Wheelers
The,
are
yeah.
the Wheelers are scary. I think that Mombi, like anecdotally, when I look at my social media feeds and I hear from
Mhm.
people who are talking about Return to Oz, because it has had its fandom continues to grow. Mombi is the one that comes up the most as like that
Mhm.
is terrifying. Which, again, for those who don't know, if you're somehow still listening to this and you haven't seen the movie, I don't know why you're here, but thank you. Um, Mombi is a witch who has figured out that she can detach her head and replace
Mhm.
it with another head depending on her mood. She can look however she wants, and she has stolen the heads of all of these women statues in the Emerald City, and she has this magical life-giving powder so
Mhm.
she can reanimate things that are not alive anymore. And yeah, she just has a hall of heads.
The implication, I think, being that she's using these heads not just for fun and aesthetic purposes, which she clearly has fun and does use them for aesthetic purposes, but also as a sort of eternal life. Like there's an implication of vampirism going on here where she's even implying that she was going to do the same thing to Dorothy, keep her in a tower until she was old enough, take her head and use it as one of her own. And the implication being that she does this to young girls, takes their heads to add to her own life. Like that's a very vampirical coded sort of story, isn't it, if you think about it?
It is, and it's made more vampiric by you realize that her original head is all of her new heads that she's harvested are on full display. They're in beautiful glass
Mm-hmm.
cases on pedestals. Her original head is just in a cabinet
Yep,
off
hidden away.
with her
Yeah,
magic powder, and it's very clear
yeah.
that yeah, she had this idea of like, I don't like the way I look. I want to be more
Mm.
youthful. I will just take that girl's head and try that on, and I'll just be able to continue. And I will say there's a shot where Dorothy is going to get the magic powder, and
Oh, the
yeah,
screaming scene.
the
Oh my
screaming
goodness.
scene. So yeah, Dorothy's going to get the magic powder. Mombi's body is laying in bed asleep. The
Mm-hmm.
heads are all asleep in their hall of heads. She disturbs Mombi's original head, and Mombi yells her name. She just yells Dorothy
Mm-hmm.
Gale, but the way she yells it, it sounds like, and this is Jean March, the actress playing the original Mombi, who also plays the nurse back in Kansas. Um, she yells it like the man from another place in Twin Peaks. Like it does
Mm-hmm.
not sound right in her mouth. Like she doesn't just say Dorothy
Yeah.
Gale. She says
No.
Dorothy Gale, and it's
Yeah.
so creepy. And then you get
It's
the
amplified too. It's amplified by the entire castle. It's like the entire structure is yelling in that moment. It's such a creepy moment.
and I should mention I got the name slightly wrong. Her name is Jean Marsh, not March.
Mhm.
Apologies, listeners, for that. But uh, my favorite shot in the movie in terms of scares is what happens immediately after that, which is she opens her eyes and screams. Dorothy grabs the powder and starts to run away, but you see a shot, and it's just sort of through a doorway into the next room. You see
Mhm.
Mombi's body rise from her bed, and she does this sort of uncanny kind of jiggle with her shoulders where
Mhm.
it looks like someone trying to look over their shoulder and then realizing they can't look
They
over their
don't have a
shoulder because
head.
they don't have a
Yeah.
head. It's
Yeah.
so creepy.
Yeah. No,
And
it's
this is
excellently done.
this is all before we even get to the Gnome King, which is
Which is like the more
incredible.
obvious horror element of the story. Like that's
It
one of the easy ones, actually.
it
The
is it is
Gnome
a
King is, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 you after you, please.
I feel like the Gnome King is the one that I would name as like my argument for why this is a work of weird, like a work of weird horror or dark fantasy, debatable, but it is a work of weird because you get this clearly other dimensional being, and all of the minions of the Gnome King are clearly other dimensional beings. They inhabit a different dimension and they just interface with ours through the rock occasionally, right? That are never explained. There's never any rules or origins. You have no idea what any of that is or where it comes from. It just is, and they're terrifying and beyond our understanding. So all Dorothy can do is accept that they are what they are. And they come with these rules, right? So at some point, the Gnome King says that his goal is to make sure every single person who remembers Oz is gone because that is when he will become human. It's like, I'm sorry, that is Eldritch God lore all the way. Like, I hate using that word, but that is the most Lovecraftian coded thing you've ever heard. That is a being from a different dimension that is somehow related and connected to our memories and our minds and is using them in order to attain corporeality in this world. Come on. That is a work of weird.
It is remarkable. You're right. Like, I didn't even think of it in terms of the cosmic, but it absolutely is that. Um, just the idea that a creature can uh interact with you, spy on you, talk to you, whatever, from literally any stone.
Mhm.
Like anywhere there's a stone, the Gnome King's people can watch
But
you.
only stone. Oh, that is their limitation. Only for
Yeah.
stone, not for anything else. Why? Who knows? Just roll with it.
Yeah, that I mean that's another part of the magical thinking of the movie, and that is a very
Mhm,
L. Frank Baum thing of just like
mhm,
there's this guy called the Gnome King. He's made of stone. He lives in a mountain, and he can watch you through stones.
mhm,
Like yeah, okay, well let's go. Um, I love the stop motion animation, and I
mhm,
specifically love the way that the Gnome King and his minions, the way their looks evolve over the course of the film because like you said he's
mhm,
trying to become human, he's trying to
mhm.
become flesh,
Yep.
and he can't do that until he gets rid of all of his enemies, and the closer he gets to that goal the more human like he becomes. So at first
Mhm,
he's entirely stop motion and he's just a giant head and a rock face, and then he becomes a sort of stop motion figure sitting on a throne,
mhm,
and then it is clearly a man wearing makeup sitting on the
mhm.
throne, and he just gets closer and closer and closer
Yep.
until you get that wonderful moment where Dorothy has finally got the upper hand on him and he's back in his monstrous rock
Mhm.
form. And the thing that the movie has been setting up since the opening scene happens, which is Belina, who is an old
Yes.
hen. This is important.
Mhm,
It's set up in the opening scene. Dorothy heads out the door and checks on Belina in Kansas in the morning, and Belina has not laid an egg. And the problem
mhm.
there, of course, is if she stops laying eggs, she will be slaughtered and eaten. And Dorothy
Yep.
does not want that to happen. So Belina waits the entire movie to lay her egg until she is
Mhm,
inside Jack's head, and as the Gnome King tries to eat Jack, um, she lays an egg and it falls out of Jack's head and into the Gnome King's mouth. And as we all know, as we all learned in school, eggs are poisonous to gnomes. So this one little egg going into this
Mhm.
vast mountain
Yep.
undoes everything.
Yep. And you cannot be upset that it's a Deus Ex or that it comes out of nowhere because no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It was
Doesn't.
established from the opening of the film. That was clearly going to be important. It just functions by rules that are none of your business. That's all that is. Like the internal logic is there somewhere. It's just not yours to know. And I like that about it.
I think this is a good place to bring in Tenebrous Press a little bit because you and Matt Blairstone, the publisher at Tenebrous, have an ethos, have a driving aesthetic that you champion at Tenebrous, which you call new weird horror.
Mhm.
And we were just talking about the elements of weird in Return to Oz. How do you define new weird horror?
I have this gift that annoys a lot of people in that I have the capacity to find the weird and the horror in a lot of things, and oftentimes not in things that people expect. And I know a lot of people want the weird and weird horror and new weird to have rigid definitions. But unfortunately, those rigid definitions come with timestamps, right? So if you ask for the rigid definition of weird horror, that is way back in Lovecraft's time. If you ask for the strict definition of what is new weird, that was in China Miéville's time, right? If you look at their Wikipedia articles, it's a back then genre. And in fiction and in music, I loathe restraining a genre to a time. I don't believe that that's fair or real. There's always new people who are working on new things in every single genre. And so I like to think of the new weird horror movement as whatever is happening right now that is sort of at the forefront of looking not across genres, but in between them, of looking at the intersection of horror with everything else, while also looking at the intersection of horror and reality. That's the new part, like topics that are relevant and current to us now in the same way that Jaws spoke to the fears of its consumers at the time. And it doesn't have to be overt, but it is in communication with what's happening in the world. And that's the sort of thing we're looking for too. And for us, a weird book or a weird story is just an expression of what happens when you don't impose constraints of a strict genre on yourself and you allow the story to explore authentically and go where it wants to go. But also at the same time, we do want stories that make sense and that are fun and pulpy and have a plot, because there's a lot of weird out there that is more vibes based than plot based. And we're a very plotty publisher. We love a good plot. So I know that wasn't helpful at all. I hope it makes a little bit
No,
of sense.
no, I love this. I love because your publishing house, because you do keep that definition very broad, and a lot of it comes
Mhm.
down to what you and Matt find compelling at the time.
Yeah.
You get such a wide range of authors
Oh, yeah.
playing with these ideas in so many different ways. And by the way, listeners, if you want an idea of what new weird fiction looks like right now, in the world of Tenebrous Press, they announced just a couple weeks ago the shortlist for the next volume of the Brave New Weird anthology,
Yeah.
which features a bunch of different authors doing a bunch of different cool things, all
Mhm.
under the New Weird umbrella. And that is over on the Tenebrous Press website. When are you
Mhm.
announcing the table of contents for Brave New Weird for?
Actually, it just came out yesterday.
It came
It's
out
out.
yesterday.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
missed
it's
it.
out. We've got the winners up. We've got the table of contents sorted, and we're really looking forward to this one. It's going to be beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah, it is a
yes.
yearly anthology. It takes from all the other publishers that are around us and we interact with, and we look at so many works of either weird that are overtly called that or that they're not. A lot of them, they think that they were published, in a literary magazine or a straight up horror magazine. And we show up and we go, actually, this is kind of weird. Can we have it? And people are nice enough to say yes and let us feature them and promote them as the best of what New Weird has to offer in that year.
So this will be volume 4 of Brave New Weird, and
Yes.
listeners, you will be able to get it in July. The
Yes.
table of contents is now up at Tenebris's website, and you
Mhm.
can go find it. So if you're a fan of this kind of fiction, or you want to submit to Tenebris, there in
Mhm.
the future, like this is a good place to start. Um,
Absolutely.
so having said all of that, and having talked about weird and how it has shaped, how it has become what it's become in your mind as an editor and as a writer. Um, we've been talking about it a lot, but I kind of really want to drill down into what Return to Oz gave you in terms of understanding weird, because I'm really interested in this because, like I said earlier, I didn't find any of the Oz stuff scary when I was a kid. I just
Hmm.
found it interesting. I was just like, this is like nothing else I've ever seen, and
Hmm.
nothing else I've even heard of
Yeah.
at the time. Like the idea that there was this witch who lived in a palace who kept a closet of heads, and she could just change out her
Hmm.
heads. I was just like, that is just so interesting, and I want to know more. And
Hmm.
it was that thing of when you're a kid and you get obsessed with something. Like we didn't have Wikipedia, it was whatever 1992 or something. So I couldn't go like look up more stuff about this. I didn't know there were books
Hmm.
that I could go read. I didn't know there were sequels to The Wizard of Oz. I just was like, this is so amazing. So you mentioned not going back to it as an adult until just now, but
Hmm.
what do you feel like this movie gave you that now is part of your ethos?
Oh my gosh, so much. And I don't think I even realized how much until I watched it for this. And I watched it and I was like, oh my God, this is where that comes from. Um, One of the smallest things, for example, that popped up, this isn't even a big deal, but you remember how she finds a key with the Oz inscription at the beginning of the film, somewhere in
Yes.
the barn in the hay, she finds this old iron key and she's like, this is important, this key is important, and I have to show people. And they don't believe her anyway. And the moment I resaw that scene, I looked over on the mantle of my fireplace where I bought this house in the village a couple of years back, and I tore down an old shed and I found an iron key in the hay. And I picked it up and I went, I don't know why, but this is important and I'm keeping it. And that key is still on my mantelpiece right now. And you cannot convince me that that is not because I got that image stuck in my head of Dorothy taking that key and going, this is important. Um, but I feel like a lot of the vibe of this movie is the universe and the world is bigger than you, and you don't have to understand all of it in order to deal with it, survive it, help, be the best person you can be and interact with it, or at least try. And I feel like that's fundamental to who I am as a person and as a writer and as an editor. I One of my most common negative reviews for my books, which we like to pretend those don't exist, but like, of course, everybody has them. It's not a big deal. One of the most common complaints comes from people who are not necessarily fans of the weird as such, and they will say, well, you never get a lot of explanation. I never understood what was going on. I was never like in the clear with where any of this came from. And I appreciate that because, yes, that is probably part instinct and part design. It's who I am. And I think a lot of that came from these movies, from Return to Oz, from Alice in Wonderland, from, The Little Prince and all that stuff from when I was a kid, because they don't feel the need to explain things to you in order to show you something wonderful and stick with you for the rest of your life. And maybe it's all the more wonderful because you never really understand all of it. And it allows this freedom, it allows this space for you to either fill it in with your own imagination or just relax into the acceptance that the world is bigger than you and you're not the most important thing in it. And like at my core, I call myself an optimistic nihilist. For me, it's important to remember that the world is not about me. That is my happy place. And the universe is big and vast, and we don't know everything about it and never will. And we don't control it and never will. And that's a really good thing for me. And I feel like, that's clearly one of the core tenets of this movie as well. And a lot of movies like it. Um, Another example that comes to mind is the Gnome King and his minions specifically. The reason why I immediately thought of interdimensional beings and like the weird in this movie, there's this book that I read probably a few years after I saw this movie called Flatlands. Flatlands, a romance in many dimensions. The title is a bit silly, but the book is absolutely brilliant. And it's a book about these entities that live in a two-dimensional world, right?
Hmm.
They're squares and lines and triangles. And there's this whole society and hierarchy and the way that their world works, but they're two-dimensional. They live in that space and they see only in their own space. And the moment when a sphere enters their dimension, specifically the main character, a square, interacts with this sphere. And it explains to us from his perspective, like what would a square see if a if a sphere was trying to talk to him? Well, he would hear the voice coming from somewhere inside his own body because the sphere is somewhere above in a different dimension, right? And if the sphere chose to cross through the dimension of the square, all the square would see is a circle, a small one, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then smaller and smaller and smaller, and it disappears again. And if you look at the way that the Gnome King and his minions are interacting with Dorothy and with, the embodied world through the rock, it gave me that feeling that that's what's going on here. Like these are beings from somewhere else. All they're doing is touching on this plane of existence briefly. And I'm like, I mean, you read Night Ship. That's kind of the point of the book, too, in many ways. It's the interaction of things from somewhere else with us. And if you boil it down, Whisperwood is about the same thing. The beings are different, the origins are different, the vibes are different, but it's always these things from somewhere else and how they interact with us and how negatively those interactions can go sometimes and how little we understand about things from elsewhere. So, like, obviously, this was a huge influence on me, even though I hadn't watched it in a very long time.
So we didn't set out to do this, but I really think that you just sort of summed up the allure and the power of weird fiction in about 5 minutes right there. Which so now, like listeners, this episode and the Gemma Files episode we did way back when about Arthur Machen, those are your two. If you want to understand weird fiction and how it works, these are your two episodes for that. Um, Alex, it has been so wonderful talking to you. Uh, like I said, Night Ship is out right now. You have what's the next book called?
The next book is called Tatratea, just kind of a hard title to remember. But it is coming out in October through Clash Books, and it's going to be announced in all the usual spaces. AlexWoodroe.com is probably the easiest one where you can find updates on that stuff. Patratea is also very much a work of weird.
Yeah. And of course, everybody go find Tenebrous Press on the various social media platforms. Support them. They put out amazing stuff all year long. Had an incredible 2025 at Tenebrous, and I'm sure another great year is coming.
It is. It really is.
Yeah. Where else can people find you online, Alex?
Well, I mean, the most secure space to always find me is tenebrouspress.com and the Tenebrous Press newsletter because, Matt and me, we feel so responsible to Tenebrous that even if we don't promote our own work as much as we should or spend as much time on our own stuff as we should, we are always there at Tenebrous and we are always there for Tenebrous. So that's, it's everything for us. That's the safest place to find us.
Excellent. Our guest has been Alex Woodroe. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks once again to Alex Woodroe for being on the show. The Night Ship is available now wherever you get your horror books. It's great. You should pick it up. And you should go check out everything Tenebrous Press is doing because they put out amazing stuff all year long. Tenebrouspress.com. Find them on socials. Keep track of everything they have going on. And hey, if you want to keep track of everything we have going on here on The Scares That Shaped Us, the best way to do that is follow us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. That is where you will find all of our new episodes, as well as new guest announcements. We occasionally do giveaways. It's a fun time. Give us a follow if you like the show. You can also find us under The Scares That Shaped Us at Facebook, and you can find us on YouTube as The Scares That Shaped Us. If that is how you prefer to listen to your podcasts, head over there, like, and subscribe. If you like the show, please do us a favor. Head over to the podcasting app of your choice and leave us a 5-star review. That helps us to get featured and helps us enormously when it comes to showing up in other people's feeds who haven't heard of the show yet. So if you're able to do that, we would appreciate it. And, if you like the show, tell your friends. We're always hoping to grow our listener base so we can keep doing this cool thing because I don't want to stop. I'm having a great time. You may have noticed over the last few weeks that the episode rate has slowed down. And I just want to let everyone know that we are, for the near future, going back to bi weekly cadence in releasing episodes. So we won't be doing weekly shows. We'll do a show every other week. My wife and I are in the process of moving, and it's stressful, a lot going on. So we're just going to slow the podcast down a little bit. We're not stopping, we're slowing down. Later this year, we'll get back up to weekly episodes, I promise. But for now, that means we will see you with another brand new episode in 2 weeks on February 18th at noon Central. We'll announce the guest closer to that time. So we hope everyone tunes in. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.